Hello, my name is Sam and welcome to Midshore Online Training. Today we are going to be discussing the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR. Firstly, what is GDPR? Well, it is the General Data Protection Regulation, as we've just discussed, and it is also known as EU 2016/679. It is an update to the current GDPR regulation. It is quite simply a regulation that is enforced by the European Parliament on member states for the handling of data. It also applies to those who process individuals' data for individuals who are in the EU. The new regulation will be replacing the previous version that was first introduced in 1995, labelled 9546 EC. So, what are its objectives? The GDPR's primary objectives are giving EU citizens back control of their personal data, simplify the regulatory environment for international business by unifying it. So how is this achieved? The new regulation had to heavily account for the internet and the way we're using handheld devices, as back when the old regulation was written, the internet was in its infancy. The regulation does not apply for B2B. It is solely for individuals' data. The next topic we are going to cover is the timeline for adoption of GDPR in the EU. On the 21st of October 2013, the European Parliament Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs had an orientation vote. Then on the 15th of December 2015, negotiations between European Parliament, Council and Commission resulted in a joint proposal. The LIBE Committee votes positively on the outcome of the negotiations. Then on the 8th of April 2016, GDPR was adopted by the Council of the European Union. On the 14th of April 2016, it was then adopted by the European Parliament. Carrying on its journey, it first was published in the EU Official Journal on the 4th of May 2016. 20 days later, the new regulation entered into force. On the 25th of May 2018, all member states will have to be ready, as this is the date the regulation applies from. This also means that anyone else caught under the regulation dealing with individuals' data from within the EU are also needing to comply by this date. Now we are aware of the timeline for adoption, we might look at the need for change. The old directive was passed in 1995, a time when the internet was in its absolute infancy. The same can be said about the Guernsey Data Protection Law, which was passed in 2001, as it is largely based on the old EU directive. Since 1995, internet use has grown over 100 times, which now means that over 1/3 of the world's population uses the internet, or 2.375 billion people. A fun fact to note, Google didn't even exist yet. In the directive, it covers data controllers and data processors. To give you an outline of what each is, a data controller is a natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body which have alone or jointly with others the purpose and means of processing personal data. A data processor is defined as a natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body which processes personal data on behalf of the controller. The concept is unchanged from the previous directive. Controllers still bear the primary responsibility for compliance, but now, processors also have direct responsibility for compliance obligations. So, who does GDPR apply to? It applies to any organization holding or processing the personal data of individuals. The directive also outlines the Data Protection Officer, which is somebody who is required for all public authorities or for companies that are data controllers with processing operations that require regular and systemic monitoring of data subjects on a large scale. This was written in Article 37 of the directive. The person who is the data protection officer is responsible for ensuring data protection compliance within the organizations. This was mentioned in Articles 37 to 39. The data protection officer should be a person with expert knowledge of data protection law and practices. It is very similar to the role of a compliance officer, but not strictly the same. The data protection officer is also expected to be proficient at managing IT resources, data security, including dealing with cyber attacks, and other critical business continuity issues related to the holding and processing of personal data. Now we are going to discuss GDPR outside the EU with the Guernsey example. Due to the regulation being extraterritorial, meaning that it would apply to the data controller and processor who is in the EU, or if the data subject individual is based in the EU. This means that non-EU data controllers and processors are caught under the regulation. It is important for Guernsey to seek equivalence to be able to keep trading with individuals based within the EU. So how does Guernsey become equivalent? A new data protection law in Guernsey will be largely based on the new EU regulation. Political leadership in this area is being provided from the Policy and Resources Committee, Home Affairs and Economic Development. There is a lead officer within our local civil service. The tenure of the Data Protection Commissioner has been extended. A high level of engagement has been taking place with the EU and will continue to do so with Jersey. However, this does not mean that the jurisdictions will have identical legislation. This does mean there are some potential advantages for Guernsey. For one, we will maintain our access to the EU market. We can build on our excellent reputation for compliance with international law, regulation and standards. The first mover advantage will mean that we can get more business. We'll be known as a safe haven for complying. We can take business that is no longer able to be done in non-compliant jurisdictions. A great example of this is the UK. With them currently going through Brexit, there is a good chance they will not be ready for GDPR. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Association of Data Protection Officers. Data protection officers are going to require their own support mechanism. Compliance officers already come together under the Guernsey Association of Compliance Officers. A few local companies have pulled together to launch the ADPO, which is open to anybody with an interest in GDPR and other data standards. I urge you to take a look at the website, which is www.adpo.co.uk. If you are interested in finding out more about GDPR, there are a few options here that you could look at.